mentes más brillantes de la creatividad a nivel internacional. Presento a Rei Inamoto, reconocido como uno de los 5 creativos de la industria interactiva más influyentes del mundo. Rei es uno de los profesionales más galardonados de la industria interactiva y ha ayudado a que su agencia AKQA sea elegida la mejor agencia interactiva del mundo por varias publicaciones profesionales. AKQA, también reconocida por la revista Company, entre las 50 compañías más innovadoras del mundo, compartiendo el galardón con Apple o como Google. Sin más, os dejo con Rei para que os cuente un poco cómo está el panorama internacional en el mundo de la creatividad. Un aplauso, por favor.
So the title of the presentation is called "The Best Advertising Isn't Advertising," and it might be kind of a contradictory statement because AKQA is a company that works in the advertising industry. I might be seen as a guy who works in the advertising industry, and I assume there are quite a few of you who work in the advertising industry, either from the agency side, from the technology side, or from the client side. And the point of view that we have about this is that it's not so much about creating the best advertising to sell things to consumers, but it's more about creating the best experience for the consumers, which then turns into best advertising. That's the point of view that we as a company have. And it's actually a phrase that the founder, Ahmed of AKQA, said, and it's sort of the spirit that we have quite a bit. The other side of this statement is more of a personal one, and me personally, I got into advertising not because I liked advertising. In fact, when I was in college, I didn't study advertising. I studied fine arts, and I wanted to be an artist. And I also studied computer science as my second degree. And I didn't really know better. I didn't know that you can get into this field to make money by being creative and making creative things. To this day, I have a very cynical point of view about advertising. I openly admit that I don't like advertising, partially because as a consumer, I try everything to avoid advertising. For instance, I recently cut off my TV cable subscription in the US. In the US, you know, there are cables, there are so many channels, and what I realized is that more than half the time when you're watching TV, you're watching not content, but you're watching advertising. On top of that, the majority of advertising that you see is not very good. It's crap. It's kind of like pollution, right? So I have this very cynical view about advertising. And to this day, when people ask me, how did you get into the advertising industry? I tell people, I didn't. I never did. So, anyway, I'm going to talk about advertising today. From the point of view, looking at advertising, you know, what it is today and what it may have been in the past, right? So what I did was I divided this presentation into 2 sections. The first section is theory, like I said, what advertising is today and what may have been in the past. And then try to look forward what it can be, right? By showing a couple of examples that I hope are showing a new direction of what advertising communication might be. Make sense? By the way, how's that translation? Is it good? It's good? You follow? All right. So, I'm going to start with 2010, present. Look at what some of the best advertising might be today, and then rewind back a bit. So the first one, some of you might be familiar with this campaign because it won the Grand Prix at the Cannes Advertising Festival in the integrated category this year. For those of you who might not be familiar with this campaign, it was a campaign created by Nike and a foundation called Live Strong. And it's a foundation for cancer started by Lance Armstrong, the guy on the left side, who is a professional cyclist who won the Tour de France 7 times. His story, in case you didn't know, is that he was diagnosed with cancer many, many years ago, and he almost died, yet he came back to professional cycling and went on to win so many Tour de France. And last year they created this campaign around the time of Tour de France, which was in June, and advertised the Live Strong Foundation to create awareness about cancer and raise hope for fighting cancer. So they employ a lot of different types of media, whether it was a TV spot or series of TV spots, or outdoor channels like the one that you see on the right top corner, or websites, online channels like the one you see on the left. And then the one on the right, which is this truck, was an interesting thing called the chalk bar. And essentially what this was that it's a machine that takes Twitter feeds, right, from, say, computers or mobile, that are messages from these people who are, a fan or fans of Lance Armstrong, or just trying to raise hope about cancer. And these Twitter feeds would be fed into that machine, and that machine would scribble or write messages sent by these people on the streets and on the roads of the Tour de France course. And what's really brilliant about that is that it's really based on an insight. The fact that a lot of fans of Tour de France in France, what they do is that they would write messages with chalk, literally by hand, for the cyclists to see. It was based on that insight, but then using technology, brought that possibility to literally hundreds and thousands of millions of consumers to be able to send their messages from overseas to the riders, the cyclists in the Tour de France. So it's one of the best examples of integrated campaigns that are out there today. This was from 2009. And like I said, it was recognized as one of the best pieces all around. And just to give proper credit, it wasn't something that I worked on or something that we as an agency worked on, but it was by a company called White & Kennedy, which is one of the best agencies that I have a lot of respect for. So that's one of the best examples of integrated campaigns today. And simplifying this approach a little bit, you have different types of media channels, right? So you have static media channels like print and outdoor, out of home. You might have radio, you might have TV, you might have computer, you might have mobile, and you might have a lot of other things, but these are the types of surfaces or channels that the advertisers can use to distribute that message. And this is sort of the approach that a lot of companies and a lot of marketers have. So that's 2010. So from here, I'm going to rewind about 50 years, from 2010 to 1960. And the reason why I'm rewinding 50 years is that in the US, 1960, or that decade, is seen as the birth of modern advertising. For those of you who might be familiar with the work from this agency, BBDO, which, by the way, is also an agency that's in the very popular TV show called Mad Men. Do you guys have that in Spain or in Europe, by the way? You do. So BBDO, although it's not the main agency, it's the competitor agency in the show. And this ad was created by that agency and by one of the partners, a guy named Bill Bernbach. And he is considered to be the father of modern advertising. And he really sort of started this very iconic way of talking about brands to consumers in a very, very simple, but also sort of metaphorical way. And I really encourage you guys to search online. If you type in Volkswagen 1960 advertising, you will see a lot of examples of advertising from BBDO of that era in the States. And that you can see that type of approach is still noticeable in some of the work that we see in modern advertising today. I'm going to show one TV spot that I found online, which is quote-unquote integrated with this print piece. Make sure that the sound's up.
This year, just about everyone's coming out with a brand new small car. So this year, just about everyone will be telling you about this great new idea. To think it is a great idea. We at Volkswagen have been working on it for 21 years.
So that's one of the first examples of integrated campaigns from 1960. So if I apply the same, you guys still hear me? I seem to be having trouble with the microphone a little bit. Let me see if I can fix it. Good? All right, back on. So let me rewind, let me look at the approach from 1960. And when you think about the same type of media outlets, from 2010, yeah, back in 1960, there was some similar channels like TV and radio, maybe a bit more basic than what we have today. But you would have things like print, radio, and TV, maybe a few other things back then. But still, these are the types of media channels that people employ or advertisers employ to distribute that message. So that's 1960, right? So from 1960, I'm going to rewind a bit further back in history. So that's 500 years ago, right? Not just 50, but 500 years ago from 1960. And the reason why I'm rewinding 500 years all the way to 1460 is because of this. Some of you might recognize these prints, right? So these are some of the pages from the first edition of the Bible, right? And these specific pieces might be replicas, but these are some of the first ever made prints in history. And it was created by a guy on the left named Gutenberg, a German inventor who is credited with the invention of the printing press. And it's a type of technology that wasn't available until then, but it really made Christianity a successful organization because it allowed Christianity or the church to spread the message in a mass way. Up until that point, the only way that Christianity or religion could spread the word was word of mouth, literally, either at churches, temples, what have you, by telling stories directly to people. So those days, the media choice was a lot simpler than what we might have today. So let me compare these three different times, 2010, 1960, and 1460, and then see if I can find some kind of similarity in the approaches that we are taking currently versus other people in the past were taking. So if you think about 1460 and how Christianity became successful, and by the way, I'm not here to preach Christianity or religion, I'm just using it as a way to make a point, is that you start with a truth, a product truth. So let's say in the case of Christianity, the truth is that there's God, right? And in order to create believability in that truth, what they did was to create a story around it, right? So let's say, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and there are so many apostles, and these are the stories around Jesus Christ, and this is how he became what he is today, and how we, as the audience, can be part of that story, right? And then from this point, what they did was they leveraged the Bible, which is the print medium, in order to distribute it. So have the product truth, create a story around it, multiply by essentially print in this case, and that would lead to religion. You could replace the cross with other religious symbols, but that's sort of the approach that they've taken. So let me use this sort of purposely simplified approach and mirror it against the two other times that I talked about. Is 1460, and what happened in 1960 is that you still had the same kind of approach. The product was Volkswagen, and the truth was that it's small, and then came up with a story called Think Small, right? And then multiply it by different types of media outlets, whether it's print, radio, or TV. And the new religion of the 20th century is business, right? So let's look at today, 2010, what's happening. The first half of this equation is the same. Find the product truth, create a story around it. But the media choices are different, or even more than what we used to have in the 1960s. We still have media types like print, radio, TV, but a flat panel TV as opposed to a tube TV. And we have other types of devices like computers and mobile devices to the power of social media, right? And we will still lead to the same result. So this is purposely simplistic, but you can kind of see that the approach that we as human beings have taken for the past 550 years is quite similar. What's different is not the first half of the equation, but the second half has become a little bit more complicated. There are two commonalities, similarities between these equations. The first part is storytelling. What differentiates us as human beings from, say, animals and other living things is that we tell stories, right? And that's been one of the basic fundamental features of human beings. Even back, 2,000 years ago, people were still telling stories by painting pictures on the cave walls. 1460, it may have taken the form of religion and print media, right? In 1960, that may have become business. In 2010, we still approach it the same way. But we tell stories. That's one of the fundamental things that differentiates us from other living things. The other thing, again, if you look at this equation, but if you look at the right side of the equation, there's also a similarity. And that similarity is technology, right? So print, which is a very analog type of technology, it still is a technology, and it was a phenomenal invention when it was invented in 1460. In the 20th century, there were other types of technologies that helped us tell more stories. So let's say, film, which was invented about 100 years ago, that was a new kind of technology. Ironically, digital is replacing film as a technology, but the basic form of film and the basic premise of film was to tell stories and distribute that to many people. So those are the two commonalities that you see between different types of approaches, which are, again, quite similar, but over the years. And the way those of us in this room and in this industry, advertisers, agencies, technology people, people who make money essentially from selling products or using communication to distribute a message, we use technology as media. So the basic idea here is that technology distributes stories. That's another commonality that you see all the way through centuries. And I think that type of approach will be relevant for some time, but I would argue that this approach is breaking down as we all see in this industry. The digital is influencing the advertising industry in a more fundamental than it was 50 years ago. This type of approach is starting to break down. So as an example of how this industry or this media and advertising industry is breaking down can be summarized in this quote, who actually came from a client of ours, Nike. And the CMO of Nike said this quote: "We are not in the business of keeping media companies alive." Trevor Edwards, who's, again, he's the CMO of Nike. And it's potentially a very scary statement, especially for media companies, because if clients who pay media companies to plan and purchase media spaces so that they can distribute messages for the client, but then the client is now saying, you know what, we don't really care about you because keeping you alive is not our business. Our business is to sell more shoes, right? And they could technically sell more shoes without media companies. I think the extension of this statement that is scary for me is that you can change the word media companies to say advertising agencies, right? We are not in the business of keeping advertising agencies alive, which is true. It's very true. Another speaking of advertising agency, another statement that I thought was quite iconic came from the CEO of Amazon, Amazon.com, and he said, advertising is the price you pay for having an unremarkable product or service. So basically, you know what, if you have a really, really bad product, you have to compensate how bad it is by creating advertising to essentially lie how good your product is. It's a bit of a harsh statement, but we have to admit that there's a bit of truth to this statement. So we're in trouble. I'm in trouble. Enrique's in trouble. Maybe a lot of you are in trouble. So what do we do? So let's look at how a lot of advertising agencies and marketers and clients are doing to counterbalance that problem. So if you divide, roughly speaking, the current state of communication into two camps, there are two. One is traditional, the other one is digital. And what's happening today is a lot of companies, whether they are brands, marketers, agencies, are trying to merge the two so that they can create an integrated message and they can create digital advertising, right? And you know, there are some companies who are doing that really, really well. But I don't think this is enough because it's still relying on the same approach, the same formula that we have been using for the past 550 years. It's still using technology as media to tell stories. And we have to think about what's fundamentally different about today and today's consumers' behavior and what it was 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 550 years ago. I personally believe that we happen to live in the most exciting time in 550 years because today you see people's behavior changing fundamentally, right? So things like Twitter, you know, before I came on stage, I saw a bunch of tweets that were being fed in to the screen. And because of things like Twitter, Facebook, and other types of technology that has become available, people's behavior is changing fundamentally. People are still telling stories, right? But up until now, telling stories, especially in the mass media, used to be one way, right? So brands, religion, telling stories to millions of consumers or millions of people, right? But now, because of technology, that story can go the other way around. So it's not just about telling stories. As long as we keep telling stories, that might make us human, but that's not enough. If you look at it from a brand's perspective, beyond traditional and digital, we need to think about what marketers and brands do and what we as agencies do. So oftentimes, you know, the client would create a product, whether it's a shoe, a drink, a service, or whatever that might be, and they would go to the agency to create campaigns, communication around it. What we need to do is to actually find the intersection of product and communication and really integrate not just the messages, but with the product. And that, to me, is the next frontier of this industry, right? So the intersection of product and communication, both from the client side as well as from the agency side. So from the client side, oftentimes we as agencies, you know, we would deal with our client's marketing department. But the best success stories that we've had is that when we are also able to talk to people who create products, whether they are product designers, engineers, other types of people who are really entrenched in product development, and then work with the marketing people to enhance the product. Those are the instances where we have seen the best stories. From the agency side, especially traditional advertising agency side, we are good at telling stories, and there are copywriters who are good at writing stories, and then there are media people who take that story and distribute it in so many ways. We need to find that intersection, both from the client side as well as from the agency side, to cultivate the next evolution of what we do. So what I'm calling it is we need to change from storytelling. And I'm not saying that storytelling will disappear, but there's a new mode of storytelling, which I call story enabling, right? Now with the possibility of technology, we can let people enable stories, not just tell stories to people. All right, so that's the theory side of this presentation, and I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so showing a couple case studies, mostly from us, hopefully showing the possibilities and examples of what story enabling might be and the next evolution of what we do. The first one is called the Fiat EcoDrive. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may not have seen it. I'm going to play a case study video that summarizes what it is, and it's in English, so I will summarize and then talk about a few stories around this piece.
At Fiat, we've always made compact, practical and economical cars. Today, as we all start to think more carefully about our impacts on the environment, this philosophy is more relevant than ever. We are proud to have the lowest average CO2 emissions of any car manufacturer in Europe, and now we want to help improve your fuel efficiency even further with an innovation we've called EcoDrive. EcoDrive is an easy-to-use computer application that will help you improve how efficiently you drive. It analyzes your driving style and helps you to use less fuel, reducing your CO2 emissions and saving you money, up to 15% if used effectively. How does it work? Easy. You just download the application from the Fiat website onto your computer. You then plug any USB stick into the blue and me port of your Fiat, and information on the way you drive will be saved to it automatically. You then plug the stick back into your computer and the information uploads into the EcoDrive application. Our technology then gets to work, converting your data into useful facts and figures. It's completely anonymous, so no one else sees your details. EcoDrive analyzes your driving technique and marks it out of 100, giving you a score called your Eco Index. It shows how efficiently you've driven based on your acceleration, deceleration, gear changes, and speed. Clever step-by-step tutorials then help you improve your score by showing you how to improve your driving using information from your own journeys. There are lots of other ways to use EcoDrive too. You can monitor the total number of miles you drive, your CO2 emissions, and the money you've saved. You can even track your progress over time and set yourself challenges to improve your Eco Index score. You'll also be part of a unique online community called Ecoville. It's populated by all the Fiat EcoDrivers around the world. As more drivers join, the community grows, and so do the savings we're all achieving together. EcoDrive is an industry first. As a beta version, it'll evolve and develop as more people use it and come back with new ideas. The technology is complex, but the result is simple. You and many other drivers like you save money and reduce your carbon footprint. And if each of us makes just a few small changes, together we'll create a world of difference. EcoDrive is free and ready to download now. See you in Ecoville.
So this was a couple of years ago for client, obviously for Fiat, and the origin of this assignment was quite interesting. One day, our client, who's a marketing person, was having lunch in a cafeteria, and he ran into a few people who happened to be from the engineering, right? They were having lunch, and the engineering guys were talking to the marketing guy, hey, we are creating a product that is using a USB stick, USB drive. And the aim for that product is not for this, but back then, this idea wasn't born. The idea was to let people copy music files from their laptop and bring that over to their car, plug it into the dashboard of their car so that they can listen to the same music, right? And they knew that because the computer within a car is connected to every aspect of the car, not only can you listen to the same music, via the stereo, but also you can store the driving data from the car onto that USB drive. The engineering guys told that story to the marketing guy over lunch and said, hey, you know what? There could be something interesting to do with that data. Data for regular consumers like us, it's meaningless. It's just a sequence of zeros and ones. But it's data about somebody's driving history. So then the marketing guy came to us and said, hey, we have access to this data. Is there anything that we can do with it? And we say, you know what, data is a kind of story, a story that is stored in the sequence of ones and zeros about that person's driving. And then from that point, long story short, the idea of EcoDrive was born. And the word EcoDrive is made up of 4 words. The first part, eco, is ecological because it's environmentally friendly. And 2, economical, because it would help you save gas. Drive, obviously, driving, and a USB drive or USB stick. So it's made up of 4 words. And to us, this is showing the kind of possibility when you integrate product and communication. Because then, this data that is essentially stored of these people can be distributed by those people to other people, like you saw in the video, and then that would increase the image of Fiat. One of the visions that Fiat as a company set a couple of years ago is to be the most environmentally friendly car company in the world. And this is one of the ways to help them get there. So next example, another car company, Volkswagen. And it was a campaign that we did in the US. I would say this case was slightly different because by the time the client came to us, the product was already made. And in this case, the product was the car itself, Volkswagen GTI, which is a small sports car that Volkswagen sells. They don't sell a lot of them. They just they tend to create a smaller number of this model and then distribute it to car enthusiasts and tech enthusiasts. This was last year, and the idea that we proposed wasn't so much about creating a mass message that people would find interesting. But the challenge that we set ourselves was, can we create a test drive for these consumers so that they can get a feel of that car and how that car drives? Now, the challenge last year, especially in the US, is that because of the financial recession that we had in the US, and the auto industry, the automotive industry was really, really horrible, right? And the client said, we don't have a lot of money. Can you be clever about spending money so that we're not spending, millions and millions of dollars? So I'll run this video that will tell you a bit more about this program.
On October 15, 2009, Volkswagen launched the all-new 2010 GTI. The response was both immediate and overwhelmingly positive. VW saw an 80% jump in leads, test drives, and quote requests. Now what if we told you there was no paid media? Not a single online banner, print ad, or broadcast spot. Recognizing the overlap between the GTI's tech-savvy target audience and the millions of iPhone users, Volkswagen and AKQA launched Real Racing GTI. The game embodied everything GTI fans love about the car: innovation, performance, and style. Users shared their fastest laps by posting videos on YouTube, and an online leaderboard tracked global player rankings. In the showroom, players found a gallery and full specs on the new Mark 6. Using the iPhone's GPS function, fans could easily locate the nearest dealer and schedule a test drive. Within days, dealers were reporting sales directly connected to the campaign. To keep people playing, the winner's circle was created where users could enter to win one of 6 limited edition GTIs. Customized by AKQA and produced by VW, the cars included carbon fiber accents, a unique badge, and embroidered leather seats. Winners also received exclusive apparel and accessories. The more you played, the more chances you had to win. Fans were thrilled, and the mainstream media took note. In 1 week, Real Racing GTI became the #1 app in 36 countries around the world. With over 4.3 million downloads, what started as a US-focused campaign quickly became a global phenomenon.
So again, it wasn't so much about creating a message and distributing the message, but rather creating an experience, in this case, a test drive. And we decided to give that test drive experience through the most intimate device that anybody would have, which is a cell phone. And the problem that we face with this program is that we did this last year, and I think it may have been the most successful campaign that Volkswagen did ever, with very little money. So now we have the pressure to do the same or better with the same amount of money. So we are kind of we've created a problem for ourselves. So we have to somehow outdo that this year or next year. One more case study. It's a gaming company. It's a game. And what is interesting about this case study is that we've been working with this game development company called Bethesda. And by the way, Bethesda, they just released a game called Fallout. And hopefully, maybe next time I'm here, I can talk about that one. But Brink is another game that they have. And the part that's really different from other agencies, perhaps, is that we've been involved from the very beginning of the game development, including the name of the game. So the name and the branding that you see here is something that we created with the client. And we would create, the name, the look, even the font, and these icons and graphic treatments that become part of the game. So we are really entrenched in the making of the game with the client. These are some campaign taglines that we wrote. Within the game, we knew that there were two different camps that were fighting against each other. So we also created the branding for these camps within the game. Some character designs, some of the specific details. This was a media kit that we created that we distributed to journalists. Posters that were included in the media kit. Packaging design, print advertising, website, and then the trailer. So I'll run the trailer. Basic premise of the game is that if you play this game, you die, unless you kill somebody else. All right, so I'm going to just wrap it up in a couple of minutes. So the last thing that I'm going to show, it's not really something that we've done, but it's a door handle. And I heard about this from a friend of mine. And the reason why I wanted to show this is that there's something special about this door handle. And the tricky thing is that you can't see what's special about this door handle. Any guess? And the reason why you can't see is that this is a door handle for blind people. On the handle, when you grab it, on the other side of the handle, there's Braille, the Braille language for blind people, so that when a blind person touches the handle, there's a message that's written. This is not necessarily driven by technology, but it's driven by an insight in a way that marries product and communication. So the point about storytelling to story enabling, the intersection of those two things, product and communication, is the next frontier of what we do. And just to wrap it up, the way we've been approaching communication from an advertising perspective, and especially from an agency perspective, we've been employing this type of model, art director and copywriter. While it might be relevant to some extent, I don't believe that this is going to be relevant for everything moving forward. And the shift that we need to make is combining a storyteller and a product designer. And then the reason why we need to do it so that we can combine or merge function and emotion. Going back to the icons that we had, this is what we do. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Me comentan que tenemos tiempo para un par de preguntas. Solo dos.